So tonight we're going to take a journey on what is probably the most famous, most legendary train in history, the Orient Express. You've probably heard the name and immediately think of Agatha Christie, of spies in trench coats, of grand duchesses, and glamorous, mysterious romance under the flicker of gas lamps. And in a way, that's the story we've all been sold. A rolling palace of luxury, a symbol of the golden age of travel. But the truth is, the glamour was a thin, velvet-tanned walnut veneer painted over a world of physical misery, crushing boredom, and profound discomfort. Tonight, you are not a detective on the hunt or a princess on the run. You are simply a passenger, and you are about to discover that the golden age of travel was anything but golden. All right, find that perfect cozy spot. Let your head rest easy and allow your body to get heavy and comfortable. We're heading to Paris in 1888, where the hiss of steam isn't the sound of an adventure. It's the sound of an ordeal about to begin. Congratulations. You have just arrived at the Gare de l'Est in Paris in the year 1888. For a moment, you just stand there, a perfectly still, perfectly dressed statue amidst a hurricane of frantic human activity. The air itself is the first assault on your senses. It's a thick, heavy thing, a toxic perfume of the industrial age. You can taste the sharp, metallic tang of coal smoke from a dozen hissing engines, a flavor that coats the back of your throat. Underneath, that is the smell of hot, greasy oil, and the damp, mineral scent of steam billowing from the bellies of the iron beasts that wait on the tracks. And the noise, it's a relentless, deafening symphony. The deep, guttural rumble of the locomotives vibrates through the soles of your tiny leather boots and up into your bones. High-pitched steam whistles shriek without warning, making you flinch. Porters, their faces slick with sweat and grime, shout at each other in a rapid-fire mixture of French and German, their voices echoing in the vast, soot-stained glass canopy of the station. It is the sound of a city, of an entire continent, in a hurry. You are not in a hurry. You are not permitted to be. Your role here is to stand silently and wait. The gas lamps, already lit against the gray afternoon gloom, cast a hazy, theatrical glow over the scene. They glint off the polished brass of the train carriages, but they also illuminate the filth. The platform is slick with a mixture of rainwater, oil, and something you'd rather not identify. The air is so thick with smoke that the far end of the station dissolves into a blurry, impressionistic fog. This is not the grand, romantic gateway to adventure you've read about in novels. This is a factory for people. You are encased in your traveling suit, a heavy construction of dark blue wool that feels less like clothing and more like a suit of armor. Your feet, which have been standing for a quarter of an hour, are already sending sharp, shooting pains from the confines of your impossibly narrow boots. Fashion, you have been taught, is a form of discipline. Right now, it feels more like a punishment. On your head is an elaborate hat, a creation of felt, feathers, and silk flowers. secured with a series of long, sharp pins that feel like small daggers being pressed against your scalp. One sudden move, and you're certain you would scalp yourself. And beneath it all, the ever-present, ever-faithful tyrant, your corset. It grips your ribs in an unyielding cage of whalebone and steel, restricting each breath to a shallow, ladylike whisper. You long to take a deep, cleansing breath of the filthy air, but you can't. Your luggage, a half-dozen massive wooden trunks bound with iron and heavy leather, is being loaded onto the train. This isn't just travel. It's a military-style deployment of personal belongings, requiring 3 sweating porters and a series of loud, frustrated grunts. You can't help but think of the sheer, dead weight of your own life. You are not a person who can simply pick up and go. You are an expedition. Finally, a liveried steward with an immaculate mustache and an air of profound calm approaches. "Madame," he says with a slight bow, his voice a quiet island in the sea of noise. "Your compartment is ready. If you would please follow me." You walk towards the train, and for the first time, you can truly appreciate the magnificent beast. The carriages are a deep, gleaming blue, almost black in the gaslight, with the company's crest, CIWL, in elegant gold letters on the side. The windows are large, polished to a perfect shine, offering a tantalizing glimpse of the luxury within. It is not just a train. It is a promise of another world. But getting to that other world is an ordeal. The step up into the carriage is perilously high. You have to gather your heavy skirts in one hand, careful not to reveal more than an inch of your ankle, a scandalous offense, while hoisting yourself up. The narrow corridor is a challenge of its own. Your bustled skirt, a cumbersome cage of wire and fabric, scrapes against both walls at once. You have to turn sideways to move, shuffling along like a crab. Your elegant posture completely compromised by the simple act of walking. The chaos of the platform instantly disappears, replaced by a hushed, carpeted silence. The air inside is warm and smells of polished walnut, beeswax, and the faint, clean scent of starched linen. For a moment, it's a relief. But as the steward leads you to your compartment, a new feeling begins to settle in. The beautiful, warm, silent world of the Orient Express is not a world of freedom. It is a cage, just a much more beautiful one. And the door is about to click shut behind you. The steward closes the door to your compartment, and the sound is a soft, satisfying click of polished brass meeting solid wood. In an instant, the frantic world of the station vanishes. The shouting, the steam whistles, the entire chaotic symphony of Paris is gone, replaced by a hushed, carpeted silence. The only sound is the low, patient hum of the engine, waiting to begin its long journey. For a moment, this is the luxury you were promised. A sanctuary, a private, miniature world of profound peace and order. You are captivated. You let your gaze drift over every exquisite detail of your new, temporary home. The walls are not painted, but paneled in Circassian walnut, its grain a swirling, hypnotic pattern of dark and light wood, polished to a deep, mirror-like shine that reflects the soft lamplight. Above the window, intricate floral designs are inlaid with lighter woods, a delicate and painstaking art form called marquetry. You trace the shape of a rose with your gloved finger, marveling at the sheer, unapologetic craftsmanship. Someone spent weeks, perhaps months, crafting this small, perfect space. The sofa you are sitting on is upholstered in a deep blue velvet, so soft and plush that you can feel its richness even through the heavy layers of your traveling suit. The brass fixtures, the lamp, the door handles, the elegant luggage rack above the window are all gleaming, catching the warm glow from the gas lamp overhead. The lamp itself is a work of art, with an etched glass shade that casts a soft, patterned light across the ceiling. This is a palace on wheels, designed to insulate its wealthy passengers from the grit and grime of the world rushing past outside. It is a self-contained universe of comfort and order, but as you begin to settle into the space, you become aware of its limitations. The luxury is real, but it is compressed. The compartment, for all its beauty, is incredibly narrow. When you stand to remove your hat and gloves, you have to turn sideways to navigate the tiny gap between the sofa and the wall. You feel like a ship too large for its own harbor, your bustled skirt a constant, cumbersome obstacle. You realize, with a small, nagging thought, that this opulent world was built for men. It was built for their compact, practical suits and their focused, forward-moving ambitions. It was not built for you, with your layers of petticoats, your elaborate hats, and your prescribed immobility. You are a decoration, designed to fit elegantly into a space, but not to move freely within it. You stow your hat in its enormous box and place your gloves on the small, fold-down table. The simple act of removing these outer layers feels like a small rebellion, a shedding of the public self. But the corset remains, a constant, unyielding pressure around your ribs, a physical reminder of the constraints that follow you everywhere. The train gives a sudden, gentle lurch, followed by the slow, rhythmic clack-clack, clack-clack of wheels beginning to turn. You look out the window. The gas lamps of the station begin to slide past, their light catching on the raindrops that have started to streak the glass. Paris, a city you have only ever seen through the windows of carriages and the drawing rooms of your husband's associates, is already receding into the night. The journey has begun. You are moving, hurtling across a continent toward the Orient. The rocking of the train is more noticeable now, a gentle but insistent sway. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it's almost womb-like. But it also creates a subtle sense of being unmoored, disconnected from the solid ground of the world. You are in between Paris and Vienna, between yesterday and tomorrow, between the woman you were and the wife you are supposed to be. You press your face closer to the cool glass of the window. The French countryside is a dark, blurry tapestry rushing past. Occasionally, the lights of a distant farmhouse or a small, sleeping village flicker into view, a brief, lonely spark of warmth in the vast darkness before disappearing again. Those people in their small, rooted homes are free to walk from room to room. They can open a window to feel the night air. You, in your rolling palace, can do neither. The grand window is sealed shut. The train enters a tunnel, and for a moment, the world outside is plunged into absolute blackness. The carriage rattles and roars, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Your reflection appears in the window, a pale, ghostly image of yourself superimposed over the darkness. The woman staring back at you looks elegant, composed, and impossibly trapped. Then, just as suddenly, you burst back into the moonlight. The brief, intense darkness is gone, but the image of that lonely woman lingers in your mind. You lean back against the plush velvet, the rhythmic motion of the train rocking you like a cradle. This carriage is a marvel of the modern world, a symbol of progress, of speed, of the new age of industry. It is a place of wonder. But as the wheels clatter on, carrying you deeper into the night and further away from everything you have ever known, you realize the truth of it. For all its beauty, for all its walnut and velvet and polished brass, this magnificent carriage is not a gateway to freedom. It is just another, more beautiful, more mobile version of the gilded cage you already inhabit. As evening deepens, a white-gloved steward knocks discreetly at your compartment door. "Dinner is now being served in the dining car, madame," he announces, his voice muffled by the thick walnut. The announcement signals the start of the evening's next performance. The brief respite of private solitude is over. It is time to put on your armor. Preparing for dinner on a moving train is a unique and frustrating challenge in domestic gymnastics. There is no lady's maid to assist you, only the cramped, rocking confines of your compartment. You retrieve your evening gown from its protective, covering a deep emerald green silk that your mother insisted was a suitably sophisticated choice. It feels cool and impossibly heavy in your hands, a suitable weapon in the silent war of social judgment. Changing in the narrow space is a clumsy, awkward dance. You must brace yourself against the constant swaying of the train, one hand pressed against the polished wall as you fumble with the tiny, fabric-covered buttons of your traveling suit. The silk of your evening gown rustles with a sound like dry leaves, a crisp, expensive noise that fills the tiny room. You feel a pang of resentment for its sheer impracticality. And then there is the corset. It is already on, a familiar prison you've worn all day. But now you feel its tyranny with a renewed intensity. You are about to present yourself in public, and your posture must be perfect, your waist impossibly small. You instinctively pull the laces a fraction of an inch tighter, a small, self-inflicted act of torture in the name of propriety. The effect is immediate and suffocating. Your ribs ache with a familiar pressure. Your lungs, now prisoners, can only take shallow, fluttering breaths. You are now prepared for dinner, which is to say, you are now physically incapable of enjoying it. Without your maid's skilled hands to help with your hair, you are forced to do your best with a silver-backed hand mirror, propped precariously on the small table. You work in the dim, flickering gaslight, your arms aching from the unfamiliar effort of pinning the heavy coils at the nape of your neck. The train lurches over a set of points, and you nearly stab yourself with a hairpin. You pause, breathing hard, and wait for the carriage to settle. This is not glamour. This is labor. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of struggle, you are ready. You look at your reflection in the small, dark mirror. The woman who stares back is a stranger. Her skin is pale in the lamplight. Her hair is a perfect, rigid sculpture, and her body is encased in a shell of silk and steel. She looks elegant, expensive, and completely artificial. The performance is ready to begin. You step out into the corridor, the rich fabric of your gown whispering against the narrow walls. The journey to the dining car is a small odyssey in itself. You move through the swaying carriages, your hand trailing along the wall for balance, a series of lurching, ungraceful steps. You pass the closed doors of other compartments, behind which you can hear the muffled sounds of other lives preparing for the same ritual. You pass the kitchen car, and for a brief moment, the door swings open. You are hit with a wall of intense heat and a blast of noise. You get a fleeting vision of controlled chaos, chefs in white hats, their faces beaded with sweat, steam rising from massive copper pots, the clang of metal on metal, all choreographed within a space no larger than a closet. The smell of roasting meat and rich sauces is overwhelming, and you feel a brief, phantom pang of hunger that your compressed stomach has no room to accommodate. Then you step into the dining car, and it is like entering another world entirely. This is the performance. This is the stage, and you have just made your entrance. The dining car is a river of warm, golden light. For a moment, the sheer, calculated beauty of it all takes your breath away. Gas lamps, their flames enclosed in ornate, tulip-shaped glass shades, cast a soft, forgiving glow over everything. The tables are draped in impossibly white, starched linen, so crisp it could stand on its own. Heavy silver cutlery, polished to a mirror shine, gleams beside delicate crystal glasses, each one meticulously etched with the company's insignia. The air is filled with the low, civilized hum of polite conversation, a tapestry of French, German, and English, all woven together with the clink of glasses and the distant, steady rhythm of the train. This is not a restaurant. This is theater, and you and all the other passengers are the actors. The maitre d' greets you with a deep, formal bow and leads you to your table. The other diners are a gallery of the European elite. You see the German industrialist from the platform, his stout, bejeweled wife looking profoundly bored beside him. You see the French diplomat holding court at a larger table, his gestures grand and theatrical as he tells a story that has his companions laughing, a polite, restrained sound that doesn't dare to rise above the murmur of the room. You take your seat, your movements slow and deliberate, a performance of grace. The chair is plush velvet, but you cannot lean back. The corset forces you to sit ramrod straight, a perfect, elegant mannequin. The menu, a heavy card with gold tassels, is presented. The dishes are a litany of French culinary excess: a clear consommé with truffle, poached turbot in a delicate sauce mousseline, roasted quail with grapes, and a half-dozen other elaborate concoctions. It is a menu designed to impress, to signify wealth and sophistication. It is also a menu you have no hope of eating. The dinner begins. Course after course appears, delivered by silent, white-gloved waiters who move through the swaying car with the supernatural balance of tightrope walkers. The consommé arrives, a small pool of shimmering, fragrant liquid in a vast porcelain bowl. You take a few tiny sips, the warm broth a small comfort. But your corset is a vice. Your stomach, compressed to half its normal size, has no room. Any more than a few spoonfuls feels like a violation. A pressure that pushes up into your already constrained lungs. You watch the other women at their tables and see they are doing the same. They lift their spoons with practiced elegance. They dab their lips with their linen napkins, but they are not eating. They are performing the act of eating. The men, however, eat with gusto, their unconstrained bodies free to enjoy the rich food and wine. They discuss finance, politics, and industry, their voices the confident, rumbling bass notes of the room. You are expected to be silent, to smile, and to contribute nothing of substance. The train lurches suddenly on a sharp curve. You instinctively grab the stem of your water glass to keep it from toppling. A wave of red wine sloshes precariously in the glass of the woman at the next table. For a split second, a look of pure panic crosses her face, the terror of a ruined silk gown, a public spectacle of clumsiness. Then, the moment passes. The train steadies itself. She composes her features back into a mask of serene indifference. The entire dining car is a minefield of potential humiliations. The quail arrives. It is a tiny, perfect bird, roasted to a golden brown. You pick up your heavy silver knife and fork and begin the delicate, surgical process of dissecting it. You must do so without seeming ravenous, without struggling, without letting a single bone clatter onto your plate. You manage a few minuscule bites of the rich meat. It is delicious, but the effort of eating it gracefully is exhausting. You push the rest around your plate, a silent, socially acceptable admission of defeat. The conversation at your table is a dull, relentless drone about railway bonds and trade tariffs. You nod and smile at the appropriate moments, your expression one of polite interest. But your mind has detached itself. It floats above the scene, an invisible observer. You look at the beautiful, gilded room, at the elegantly dressed people, at the exquisite food being sent back to the kitchen, largely untouched by the women. You see a room full of people performing a ritual of wealth, a shared delusion of effortless grace that is, in reality, built on a foundation of discomfort, restraint, and profound, soul-crushing boredom. This, you realize, is the pinnacle of civilization, and it is the loneliest room in the world. Sooner or later, even in a palace on wheels, nature calls. It is a simple, unavoidable human fact, and one for which the grand, romantic vision of the Orient Express has made almost no practical provision. There is no ensuite bathroom, no private sanctuary of porcelain and plumbing. To answer this most basic of needs, you must embark on another journey, a small, humiliating pilgrimage to the end of the carriage. You rise from your seat in the dining car, murmuring a quiet, "Excuse me." The words are a delicate, coded message. You are not announcing a biological function. You are merely suggesting a brief, mysterious absence. You begin the long, unsteady walk, a public procession of private need. Every eye in the car seems to follow you, even though everyone is pretending not to notice. The simple act of walking to the lavatory feels like a public declaration of your own vulgar humanity. The corridor is as narrow and swaying as ever, but now it feels longer, a gauntlet you must run. You finally reach the small, unmarked door at the very end of the car. There is no comforting WC sign, just a simple brass handle. You turn it and step inside, closing the heavy door behind you. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It is a sharp, chemical odor of disinfectant, desperately trying and failing to mask a more fundamental, unpleasant reality. The space is a closet. It is impossibly small, perhaps 3 feet square, paneled in the same dark, polished wood as the rest of the train, as if a beautiful finish could somehow disguise its grim function. A single, flickering gas lamp casts a sickly yellow light. The toilet itself is a strange, intimidating contraption of mahogany and brass. It is not the modern flushing toilet you are accustomed to in the grand houses of Paris. It is a hopper toilet, a Victorian invention of terrifying simplicity. It is, in essence, a glorified ceramic funnel that empties directly out onto the tracks below. As the train rattles along, a cold, drafty wind whistles up from the opening, a constant, unpleasant reminder of the ground rushing past just a few feet beneath you. And now comes the logistical nightmare. You are wearing a corset that makes it impossible to bend at the waist, and you are encased in what feels like a dozen layers of fabric, drawers, a chemise, multiple petticoats, and the heavy silk of your evening gown. To use this facility requires a feat of engineering and contortion that would challenge a circus performer. You must gather the immense volume of your skirts, holding the heavy fabric in your arms to keep it from touching the questionable floor or the damp walls of the tiny chamber. You brace yourself against the rocking of the train, one hand pressed against the cold wall to keep your balance, as you attempt to navigate this ridiculous, undignified procedure. Every jolt of the carriage threatens to send you tumbling. It is a slow, clumsy, and deeply mortifying struggle. You feel a wave of hot shame, even though you are completely alone. This is the unspoken reality behind the glamour, the grimy, functional truth hidden behind the walnut and velvet. This is the part of the journey no one ever writes about in the travel brochures. When the ordeal is finally over, you turn to the small, fold-down washstand. A trickle of cold water, smelling faintly of metal, dribbles from a brass tap into a tiny ceramic basin. There is a small, hard bar of unscented soap. You wash your hands, the cold water a shock to your skin. You look at your reflection in the small, polished mirror. Your hair is slightly disheveled from the struggle. A flush of exertion and embarrassment colors your cheeks. You take a moment to compose yourself, to rebuild the mask of serene, effortless elegance before you step back out into the public sphere. You open the door and return to the corridor, the journey back to your seat feeling just as long and exposed as the journey here. You slide back into your chair, and the performance resumes. You pick up your wine glass. You smile politely. You rejoin the silent, beautiful tableau of the dining car. No one speaks of what you have just done. No one acknowledges the shared, undignified reality of it. But as you sit there, you can't help but think that this entire grand journey, this celebrated pinnacle of modern luxury, is built upon a shared, silent conspiracy to ignore the simple, messy, and deeply uncomfortable truth of being human. Back in your walnut and velvet cage, the world shrinks again. The grand theater of the dining car is gone, and you are left in the rocking, rhythmic darkness of your compartment. A porter, silent and efficient as a ghost, has transformed the space. The velvet sofa has become a narrow bed, and a second bunk, a cleverly hidden shelf, has been pulled down from the wall above it. Separate beds, of course, a concession to Victorian propriety, even in marriage. You change into your nightgown behind a small, inadequate curtain, the flimsy fabric offering the illusion of privacy, but not the reality of it. The act of unlacing your corset is a moment of pure, almost spiritual relief. You take your first deep, shuddering breath of the day, your lungs expanding into the space once occupied by whalebone and steel. The feeling is exquisite, a brief, sweet taste of freedom. But the comfort is fleeting. You climb into your bunk, a space so narrow you can barely turn over. The mattress is thin, the sheets are crisp and cold, and the small, stiff pillow feels less like a cushion and more like a block of wood. You pull the heavy wool blanket up to your chin and try to find a position that is something close to comfortable. And then you listen, because sleep does not come easily on the Orient Express. This is not the gentle, soothing lullaby you might imagine. This is a brutal, industrial symphony, and it is a performance that will last all night. The primary sound, the one that becomes the soundtrack to your restless thoughts, is the relentless, percussive clack-clack, clack-clack of the iron wheels on the iron tracks. It is a sound that is both monotonous and jarring, a constant, physical rhythm that you feel in your teeth, in the base of your skull. It never stops. It is the heartbeat of the machine that holds you captive. Beneath that is a chorus of other noises. The carriage itself groans and creaks like an old ship in a storm, the beautiful walnut panels complaining with every sway and jolt. A high-pitched squeal echoes through the car as the brakes are applied on a steep decline, a sound like a tortured animal that makes you tense up in the darkness. The unpredictable steam heater, your only source of warmth, hisses and clanks at random intervals, sometimes letting out a sudden, violent hiss that jolts you from the edge of sleep. And then there is the whistle. Every hour or so, as the train approaches a crossing or a small, sleeping town, the steam whistle lets out a long, mournful blast. It is a sound that cuts through the night, a lonely, piercing cry that reminds you just how far you are from anywhere you could call home. The motion of the train is just as unforgiving as the noise. It is not the gentle, rocking sway you felt in the afternoon. At speed, in the darkness, the carriage jerks and shudders. You are constantly being jostled, your body pressed against the cold wooden wall one moment, then thrown to the other side of the narrow bunk the next. You find yourself bracing your muscles against the movement, a low-grade physical tension that makes true relaxation impossible. Through a small gap in the curtains of your window, you see the world outside. It is a black, featureless void, occasionally punctuated by the brief, flickering lights of a remote signal box or station. At one point in the dead of night, the train slows and hisses to a halt at a desolate, windswept station high in the Alps. You peer out through the condensation on the glass. You see a single gas lamp illuminating a small, empty platform covered in a dusting of snow. A few workers with lanterns move like ghosts in the freezing air, their voices muffled and foreign. The world outside seems alien, hostile, and impossibly cold. The train is a tiny, fragile bubble of warmth and light in a vast, indifferent wilderness. Then, with a lurch and a shriek of steam, the journey resumes, plunging you back into the noisy, rattling darkness. You close your eyes and try to will yourself to sleep. You think of your own bed in your own quiet room. You think of the profound, blissful silence of a house at night, a silence you had never before considered a luxury. Here, in this marvel of modern engineering, this celebrated palace on wheels, a moment of true quiet, of true stillness, is the one thing all the money in the world cannot buy. You are paying a fortune for the privilege of being rocked, rattled, and screamed at all night long, and you have 2 more nights of this to endure. You wake on the 3rd morning not to a gentle sunrise, but to a violent, jarring lurch that nearly throws you from your bunk. For a disoriented moment, you don't know where you are. The relentless noise of the train, which had faded into a dull roar in your shallow, fitful sleep, comes crashing back into your consciousness. The air in the compartment is stale and stuffy, thick with the smell of old smoke and unwashed bodies. By the 3rd day, the glamour has begun to fade, replaced by a thin, persistent layer of grime. The magic of the journey is wearing off, and the brutal reality of long-haul travel in the 19th century is setting in. The first and most pressing issue is hygiene. There's no shower. There's no bath. Your entire world of cleanliness is contained within the small, fold-down ceramic basin in your compartment. Each morning, a steward brings a single brass jug of lukewarm water. This is your allotment for the day. It must suffice for washing your face, your hands, and whatever else you can manage in a delicate, splashless pantomime of bathing. The water smells faintly of metal, and the boiler it was heated in. It is a meager, unsatisfying ritual that leaves you feeling only marginally cleaner than when you started. And then there is the dust. It is the train's most constant and insidious companion. It is a fine, black, greasy dust, a pulverized mist of coal smoke and trackside dirt that seeps in through every window frame and ventilation slit, no matter how tightly sealed. It settles on every surface. You run your finger over the polished walnut table, and it comes away black. It gets into your luggage, a fine gray powder coating your neatly folded clothes. It gets into your hair, making it feel limp and heavy. You can feel it in your lungs, a slight, gritty tickle at the back of your throat with every breath. You are perpetually, inescapably unclean. You look at yourself in the mirror and see a stranger. The pale, elegant woman from Paris has been replaced by a tired, slightly disheveled version of herself. There are dark circles under your eyes from lack of sleep. Your skin, once meticulously cared for, feels dry and tight. Your elaborate hairstyle, once a source of pride, is now a losing battle against the constant motion and the invasive grime. You have a constant, low-grade headache from the noise, the pressure changes, and the sheer exhaustion of it all. But the discomfort is not just about cleanliness. A new, more serious anxiety has begun to creep in. The fear of sickness. The water in the pitcher was brought on board at a small, remote station in the Balkans. You have no idea of its source. Was it from a clean well or a contaminated stream? You watch the other passengers in the dining car, and you notice the subtle signs of wear. The German industrialist's wife looks pale and is picking at a piece of dry toast. The French diplomat has a persistent, rattling cough, a simple stomach ailment, a fever, a cough. These are minor inconveniences in a modern city with access to doctors and pharmacies. Here, in the middle of a vast, foreign country, trapped on a moving train with no medical staff, a minor illness could quickly become a life-threatening ordeal. The thought of cholera or typhoid, the twin specters of 19th century travel, is a quiet, unspoken passenger in every carriage. You find yourself examining every glass of water with suspicion, cutting into every piece of meat with a sense of trepidation. The beautiful, self-contained world of the train, which once felt like a sanctuary, now feels like a trap. If something were to go wrong, there is no escape. You are hurtling through a landscape you do not know, surrounded by people you do not know, governed by rules of health and hygiene that are, at best, a gamble. The exquisite 7-course meals now seem less like a luxury and more like a risk. The glamour of the journey was a fragile illusion, a performance staged on the first night. Now, on the third day, the stage is grimy, the actors are tired, and the beautiful, gilded cage has begun to rust. You wake on the final morning to a different quality of light. It is brighter, somehow, clearer, and more golden than any you have seen before. The train has left the rugged hills of the Balkans behind, and outside your window, a new world is revealing itself. Small, whitewashed villages with red-tiled roofs dot the landscape. The trees are different olive and cypress. And the air, when the porter opens the door to deliver your morning tea, carries a new scent, the faint, briny tang of the sea. An excited murmur runs through the carriage. Passengers, who for days have been settled into the placid, grimy routine of the journey, are now stirring. Voices are animated. You see people craning their necks at the windows, a sense of imminent arrival breaking the spell of transit-induced lethargy. You go through the motions of preparing for the end of the journey in a dreamlike state. You change back into your traveling suit, the same heavy, dark blue wool you wore when you boarded in Paris, what feels like a lifetime ago. The fabric feels stiff and foreign against your skin. You feel as though you are putting on a costume, reassuming a role you had briefly been allowed to forget. And then you see it. The train rounds a long, sweeping curve, and suddenly the landscape opens up. Before you, glittering under the morning sun, is a vast expanse of brilliant blue water, the Sea of Marmara. And there, on the horizon, is a skyline unlike anything you have ever imagined. A forest of slender, pencil-like minarets and vast, swelling domes rises against the sky. Constantinople. The train slows, its rhythmic clatter softening to a gentle glide as it enters the outskirts of the city. You press your face to the sealed glass, trying to take in the chaotic, colorful jumble of wooden houses, the cypress-studded hills, the bustling activity of the harbor, where 1,000 small boats bob on the water. It is a vision from a fairy tale, a city of impossible beauty and mystery. The train finally hisses to a halt inside the magnificent, Oriental-style edifice of the Circus-Eye terminal. And then comes a sensation that is both jarring and blissful: silence. The engine's final sigh is profound. The relentless noise that has been the soundtrack of your life for 4 days is gone. The silence is so absolute, it rings in your ears, and with the silence comes stillness. The constant, bone-jarring motion has ceased. For the first time in nearly 100 hours, the world is not shaking. You close your eyes for a moment, savoring it. The most profound luxury of this entire journey is not the velvet, or the walnut, or the 7-course meals. It is the simple, glorious, and completely free sensation of being still. You follow the other passengers out of your small, rolling world and onto the crowded platform. The air is warm and smells of spices, of the sea, and of the smoke from 1,000 cooking fires. The sounds are a bewildering, vibrant cacophony of Turkish voices, fairy horns, and the distant call to prayer. It is a full-scale sensory assault, and after the hushed, orderly world of the train, it is both overwhelming and intoxicating. But you are not here to experience the city. You are here to be transferred. A new cage awaits. You are escorted to a private carriage sent from the Pira Palace Hotel, the grandest establishment in Constantinople, built specifically to accommodate the wealthy passengers of the Orient Express. The journey is over, but your constrained life continues. The brief, illusionary freedom of being in transit is gone. Your new home is a suite of rooms, the pinnacle of European luxury, transplanted into the heart of the Ottoman Empire. There are velvet drapes and Persian carpets. But after days of confinement, the opulent rooms feel less like a palace and more like a slightly larger, more stationary version of your train compartment. You are to remain here in this beautiful prison while your husband conducts his business. The journey on the Orient Express is over. You have crossed a continent. You have survived the noise, the grime, the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of propriety. You have arrived, and you realize, with a sudden, sinking clarity, that nothing has changed at all. You have simply exchanged one gilded cage for another. The journey is over. You can let the sounds of the train fade away now, letting the rhythmic clatter of iron wheels dissolve into the quiet of your own room. You can feel the ghost of the corset finally loosening its grip, allowing you to take a deep, long, and easy breath. The ordeal is done. The Orient Express was a legend, a rolling symbol of an era that worshipped progress and luxury. But the romance was a myth, a beautiful story told to mask a much grittier truth. The truth of sleepless nights filled with industrial noise, of bodies trapped in fashionable prisons of whalebone and wool, of the constant, invasive grime of a coal-powered world. It was a journey of profound, soul-crushing discomfort, wrapped in a beautiful package of velvet and polished brass. The next time you board a plane and complain about the lack of legroom, or take a modern train with its smooth, silent ride and climate-controlled cars, remember the journey you just took. Remember the coal dust that settled in your lungs, the bone-jarring rattle that made sleep a distant dream, and the simple, desperate longing for a deep breath and a moment of true stillness. Your journey tonight is much simpler and infinitely more luxurious. All you have to do is close your eyes, feel the profound comfort of your soft bed, and sink into the deep, uninterrupted silence of your modern world. Let that quiet carry you into a peaceful and well-deserved rest. Sleep well,